Hello and welcome to another episode of The Future of, in the podcast where we are joined by thought leaders from various different industries as we try to crystal ball gaze on what the future holds for some of the key industries and sectors. And today we are joined by Nick Phillips, Program Director for Healthtech at Nex Cubed, and our in-house digital health expert, Geoffrey Roche, Associate Partner at Product Annex. Nick, you're currently the Program Director for Healthtech at Nex Cubed. Talk to us a little bit more about your role there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that my role with Nex Cubed as program director is to be the best number two person I can be at any time to whoever I'm working with. So I like to say that my job is to be the biggest cheerleader for our startups and help plug them into the resources that they need at the time that they need it. It's like being a part-time firefighter. I think my background, I was a founder myself. I had my own company at one point in time, didn't have a big exit or anything like that, but I got to learn all the bumps, bruises, kind of war wounds and scars that you'd need to be able to empathize with the founder process. So I think bringing that into the fold and understanding that sometimes things happen late at night or things like that, you just have to be there as a resource and just be open to living in ambiguity. I think helping our startup founders is the biggest thing that I do on a day-to-day basis. I would say outside of that, managing and oversight of all of our programs that we have going on Nex Cubed. We run our own internal accelerators, whether that's on our healthcare side or our fintech side of the business, but also to what I would say we found our way into what I would call like an accelerator as a service. So really taking our best practices that we have done when we're running our own internal programs, but doing it for other folks and other organizations as well. Right now, we have a program going with the Alliance Healthcare Foundation for their I2 Challenge, which is a $1 million grant for profits and nonprofits. It's really fun. It's a year-long program. So managing that, there's 25 companies that have gone through the first phase. We just selected down to 10 for the second phase and helping them there. Also, we have a program with the GE Healthcare out of Canada for their Edison Accelerator program. So managing that, bringing resources to bear there. And then, like I said, just helping all of our alumni companies, which on the healthcare side is 28 that we've directly invested in, but we're well over 50 to probably even 75 at this point that we've worked with in a different kind of maybe advisory capacity there. So just helping all those folks. So that's my day. A lot to do. It's maybe easier to describe what I don't do than what I do.
And being an entrepreneur yourself before getting into this kind of a role, how does that set you up to be able to empathize with the founders that you're working with and bring that additional value to them, so to say?
Yeah, I think just understanding that maybe two things. One is that founders can find themselves stuck sometimes in shiny object syndrome. And what I mean by that is that there's always a new thing or a new idea, or you're potentially having a conversation with a customer that might be adjacent to your market. It would be maybe a little bit of a stretch, but they're a big company. And then they say, hey, maybe we would love to work with you if you did this. And then it distracts you over here. So helping them navigate that. And just having been in those conversations in the room before. And I think also too, like I said, back to the firefighter and the firefighter drills, is that sometimes everything feels like a hot priority and that everything is number one. And so how do you deal with the prioritization aspect of it? Having somebody that's on the outside, and I'm not the only expert, there's tons of people that have done this. Our advisors are even better than me at this, but having been there before, just saying, hey, let's take a breath. Let's think about what we have going on. What are the main key priorities that we have? Let's whittle it down to that. And I think that's one of the things that I'd say that Nex Cubed we try to do well is, as an accelerator, sometimes startups can come in and they can feel like, oh my gosh, there's a program, I need to get into this program because it gives me this seal of approval from somebody else, but I have so much going on, it's just going to add extra into my world and make things more difficult. At Nex Cubed, or at least having that previous founder experience, that's something that I didn't want to do to our startups that we were working with. So our goal is to be additive and to make your world smaller rather than just creating additional work to do for the sake of more work, right? So that's not going to help anybody out. So if anything, I would say that our job is to take things away and just say, let's focus on these and prioritize these few things than anything else. And I think that would be something that we do, I think, well, to help empathize with the founders. And I think just understanding, that, like I said, it's a lot of personalities. You're dealing with different types of people. And a lot of folks that are early stage founders identify personally with their startup. They feel like it's an extension of their being. And so when someone tells you no and maybe doesn't do it in the nicest way, it hurts. It really hurts you personally. And so being able to be on the other side of that conversation and say, hey, I've been told no, I've been told not the nicest way, or things folks have said things that maybe rub me the wrong way. I've been there. We can talk through it, and it's not a reflection of you personally. Maybe somebody was just having a bad day on the other side. So that's maybe another way.
Right. And I think especially from that kind of a role as well, where you are able to empathize with the founders, I'm sure there'd be plenty of founders coming to you, and from your role at Nex Cubed as well, and Nex Cubed, the health track being recognized as one of the top 10 accelerators in the world. What sort of trends are you seeing in the health tech industry, especially considering the vantage point that you end up getting?
Yeah, I think I'll maybe take it back to the beginning of COVID, which I think is where digital health really not got its start, but I think the world started to listen. And it's unfortunate that it took a pandemic for the world to think that digital health is needed, when all of us that are in the industry have been screaming it from the rooftops since we found out about it. So I think the biggest macro trend that I see is that specifically what that was accelerated very fast by COVID is getting people out of the hospital system and out of and delivering care at the home. I think that's a big thing that we're seeing. And really, I think the idea that digital health and data is really exciting is that it puts patients at the center of the care circle or the care continuum, and it allows folks to regain control of their health destiny or their health fate. So I think that's really interesting. Things that I'm seeing outside of that are there's some new, I guess, latest legislature or things that are coming down the pipeline of in the home. And that's another thing that's coming out. I believe it's SSBCI is what it's called. But they're doing things where they're now reimbursing for robot animals. And it's, what the heck is that? Then you could continue to see that. And an extension of that, what's the next thing that's coming down the pipeline? Is it avatars that are sitting somewhere on a tablet or something like that's in the home? And so it's really, or now are we in the VR world? So it's just, you're continuing to see the extension of that. And I think our role at Nex Cubed is to see, okay, now they're reimbursing for robot dogs or robot cats, but what's the next 3 to 5 things that are coming down the pipe? And that's really good. So again, overall, I think the trend is that giving data back to the patient, putting the patient back in their home, delivering care there, that's huge. And I think areas that we're bullish on, or I would say that we're super interested in that would align with that, are things that are digital therapeutics. I love those. I think that's really interesting. My kind of tagline that I think about digital therapeutics with is that it's a software size investment with a pharma size return, right? So that's the kind of impact that it could have. So I think those are very interesting. We've invested at Nex Cubed, we've invested in a few companies that are in that space. I think AR and VR, it's coming, it's to be seen. I think the FDA and the other regulatory bodies it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with this. Our sister company, Sway Ventures, that we work closely with, they have a company called Applied VR, which is delivering chronic pain management solutions through VR goggles, which is pretty interesting. So that's coming out. But I think it's really, again, a macro trend would be also getting people off pills, right? And trying to do things that are more preventative maintenance and making sure that folks aren't, just having to go and get a pill and then just come back and it's like, all right, you're on your own now. It's really, again, empowering the patient through that journey. So there's a few different ways that we're doing that, but I think at the macro level, that's what we're looking at.
Nick, there was an article earlier this year that spoke to really the fact that digital health investment in 2021 hit an all-time high of 57.2 billion, which actually was 79% from the previous year, which gets to your point, certainly about the impact of COVID.
Yeah.
But one of the areas, to your point, in addition to digital therapeutics that saw record-breaking growth, not just new startups, but all actual deals that actually occurred as well, was really in the digital mental health space. I'm curious to get your thoughts, because at the end of the day, it is about person-centered care. And we know mental health has really been ignored for far too long in our ecosystem of healthcare. From a startup end, any thoughts and perspectives you can share with what you're seeing out there with regards to that?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is that there's not enough providers in the mental and behavioral health space. And then the ones that are there that are doing it, they're doing a damn good job, and excuse my language, but they're doing their best and there's just not enough of them. So they're becoming burnt out. And so I think being able to help increase throughput, but also not contribute to provider burnout is going to be a major thing. But then also too, I think mental and behavioral health has become I think, again, due to COVID, folks were at home and alone and isolated. And I think COVID has really helped to bring that conversation to the forefront. I think even you're seeing things in the macro trend that I believe it was San Francisco was the city but they were trying to do things that were around mental behavioral health space that were just like giving folks service that are in the underserved, underrepresented communities and just making more of a community-based impact there as well, to just to bring up about the conversation, because I think where it is that it's been so taboo for so long is that it's really an educational process right now. So I think making folks aware of what's out there, what folks might be experiencing, and then through education, and then bringing them into the fold with unique solutions that allow them to get access to care when they need it. And then of course you're seeing it driven really through the mobile adoption, right? So you have, I think it's BetterHelp is one where it's counselor based. If you need to go see somebody more specific, they can recommend you and refer you out. But I think the biggest thing to be able to increase the throughput, but not also contribute to the burnout, was the telehealth aspect of the mental and behavioral health space. I think that's huge. And then I think also the behavioral health change that impacts the mental side of it, I think is really big, in the sense that creating a change in the way that somebody thinks about their day or thinks about something that they're going through. And I think folks, like, it's not necessarily the same, but Noom in the weight loss space is doing a great job with that. I think some folks are taking that same approach and applying it to the mental health and behavioral health space as well. We've invested in a few really great companies that are in this space. And so, yeah, we're very bullish on it as well. I think the conversation is just getting started, and we'll probably in a couple of years be going through the same thing that we did with digital health, and more specifically mental behavioral health, and in a couple of years to come.
Great. The other area that Nex Cubed has really focused on under Marlon's leadership, which I think is fantastic and admirable, is really the DEI space within startups. Yes. And I'd love to get your thoughts on why Nex Cubed has done that authentically, because there's not a lot within that top 10 that are actually doing it the way that Nex Cubed is doing it. I mean, I know you have partnerships with HBCUs and you name it. And so can you talk to us a little bit about why that's important and where you see that going?
Yeah, I think really this is hats off to Marlon and just his vision in the space. I think during COVID, so much happened. I think socially, the country went through a lot of hardship, and I think we all felt that together collectively. So Nex Cubed, because it's built into our core values and our mission and vision that diversity and inclusion is a very big aspect of this. I think over 50% of our founders that we've invested in are either female or minority-led teams, which is huge. And we've been doing that since we opened up the doors. And that's just a big aspect of us. When we saw that the country was hurting and that folks were hurting in this community, we just said, hey, let's do what can we do? So we were already thinking about that mindset. Marlon and Jade, actually the program director for our HBCU Founders Initiative, she's a wonderful woman, but they really put together a great kind of vision for this, to bring an entrepreneurial mindset to the HBCU, historically Black colleges and universities space, and create that entrepreneurial mindset to empower the students there, because there are so many amazing ideas that I've been able and privileged to sit in on to help with on the healthcare side, and just the things that are coming out of there as an untapped resource. So really being able just to provide that exposure to, again, a community that maybe didn't have that access before is really important for us. And like I said, it's really just been baked into us since the beginning. And then when the country was hurting, we're here. It's like when we say, when you join Nex Cubed, you're joining a family. So we try to think of everybody as a family. So how could we go out and help those communities? And then it's just grown and expanded from there. It started out as an idea, how can we help? And then it's turned into its own initiative. And now we're trying to build a fund around it and all these great things that are going on. So it's just really caught wind, and it's just like the wind in the caught fire, and it's just going. So it's its own thing now, which is great. But I really think what's interesting is that the way Nex Cubed is working or interacting with these HBCUs is that we're bringing, again, the best practices that we've done with fintech, healthcare, and all the other areas that we've invested in the past, and then bringing those specifically to the HBCUs. Like I said, I've worked with a few of these teams that are come out of the programs, like the Summer Accelerator program with the HBCU Founders Initiative, and they're rock stars. They're really great. Like I said, it's just baked into us.
Which is important, because that's the only way you could truly influence that outcome.
Yeah.
Obviously, with a lot of the growth in health tech, we're starting to see more and more startups understand their role and responsibility around advancing health equity. But what's been interesting, in my view, has been that we still have a long way to go with every health tech understanding that they should all be bringing it in to actually how you develop the solution. Because healthcare is about personalized medicine, personalized care. Can you give some thoughts to how you feel as if we were giving advice to a health tech entrepreneur today that has a solution that hasn't thought about this, what would you say to them, particularly with where we stand today?
Oh, that's great. And I'll try to lean on what we have going on right now with our Alliance Healthcare Foundation program, the I2 Challenge. So just to set that up real quick. So the Alliance Healthcare Foundation, they have this I2 Challenge grant. It's $1 million grant specifically focused on impacting the social determinants of health for marginalized and underserved communities. So I think that this is right in there. What we tell our organizations is that we're working with is that you have to start with the customer first, and it's the old saying, it's probably so cliche and every entrepreneur maybe listening to this has already heard it, but it's like, don't be a hammer looking for a nail. There has to be a real need from the marketplace. Folks, for instance, like a lot of the companies are trying to reduce homelessness or homeless persons in San Diego and the Imperial counties through this initiative. Obviously there's a need there, but what is the true reason behind why these folks are experiencing homelessness or not having a shelter at all times? And so it's thinking about that, asking the tough questions, just really being and interacting with your customers. And again, and I think too, it's having that authentic approach to it, and don't just jump on the space because you think that there's money to be made and you're a healthcare company. I think it really comes down to the why the founder is doing something and not just doing it because it's trendy. If someone comes from that community, they've been through it, they lived through it themselves, like a lot of these teams are that we're working with through this I2 challenge, they're just intrinsically, they know how to talk to these folks. And so it's just being out there, being active, interacting with your customers. And then again, making sure that you metrics, this is going to sound a little bit vague, but having metrics that actually turn around and drive results and tracking your KPIs. And so if you're going to interact with your customers, what are you going to want to get out of it? What are you going to be measuring against? Okay, we need to be doing social determinants of health. How are you going to measure that? How are you going to say, we are impacting this? So you need to hold your own feet to the fire, not just use it for, cannon fodder or whatever you want to say, right? It's just, don't be just doing it because it's a trend. Do it because you actually care. And then talk to your customers. That's the biggest thing, especially in the early stage. I think folks just run with a lot of assumptions and they're afraid to be told that they're wrong or no. It's the same thing with talking to investors. But if you can say you're raising $5 million all day, but if nobody is wanting to spend that, then it's the same thing with your customers. So get out there and talk to them and learn.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And Nick, I'd love to double click on that. When we say that more and more startups are focusing on driving health equity, more startups are focusing on driving DEI, and obviously the pandemic giving some form of a tailwind to the industry as a whole. So there are certainly some form of positives to look for in the current health tech industry. But what would be some of the biggest points of friction, according to you, at the moment?
That's interesting. Okay. I think one of the biggest sticking points is the lack of connectivity to the health system in general, specifically with the underserved and marginalized communities that we would be talking about when specifically trying to improve health equity. I think that there is a lot of hesitation just in how does this happen? Some folks might be uninsured. They don't want a health insurance bill. They might have heard some crazy conspiracy theory online and they're hesitant. It's going through their own communities. And I think just the overall hesitation and then lack of connectivity creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you're not connected, you're not talking to your doctor to hear the real resources, real facts, and you're hearing it from other folks. And then you're like, also, I don't want to go to the doctor because it's just expensive. And then maybe I'm not going to get better. Then it just creates a whole lot of doubt. And we're dealing with a lot of doubt right now. So I think just being able to create that initial connectivity first is the biggest hurdle, and being able to get over that, then I think a lot of the dominoes will fall. So I think it's starting and building with trust, because these folks are marginalized and underserved, and because they've historically not been treated well. And I think they have every right to be untrustworthy of folks. And who am I to say, oh, you should trust me or us now? So I think we need to start building bridges and doing it deliberately and not just doing it because it's trendy. I think that's a big thing, is just don't do things because it's trendy, or do things because it's right. And I think that's the big thing. And so we just need to build that connectivity in and just start talking to people, and not just, thinking of them as others or something like that. I would hate if anyone did that, but it does happen.
I think you touched upon something really interesting there, especially with the issue of the connectivity. And to put that in contrast, there are over 1 billion health-related Google searches happening every day. So consumers are looking for more and more information, but not from the doctors directly, heading to Google to find information on symptoms, treatments, and support. This, which obviously in turn gives rise to a lot of false information being spread and a lot of doubt in general with the sources of information. What are your views on this really big conundrum facing the health tech industry? And obviously, this will only increase the industry also charting new heights.
Yeah, yeah, that is an interesting question. It's a very big question to try to answer. So I'll do my best. I think in the marketplace of ideas, limiting ideas is not the best way to do it. You might have more noise in the system, but I think you need the noise to be able to get the golden nuggets, so to speak, or the diamonds in the rough. So I think limiting information is tough because that's I think the easiest answer, but I think it's not always the right answer. I think again it's back to having those trusted resources and again just an overall connection and trust with the community in general. I think folks for instance, European countries during COVID and things like that, some vaccination rates were up a lot faster and higher, but also because they're talking to their doctor all the time because they have a single payer healthcare system and it's easy. It's not necessarily easier, but it's different. It's more accessible for them to get healthcare. And you don't have a primary care physician, you don't have that relationship, and then I got to go to him because somebody told me I need to get this shot. And then who the heck is this guy that's telling me what to do, right? And so I'm going to go be WebMD and I'm going to learn it. And then as soon as you get online and you become Dr. WebMD, everybody has cancer. So it's just not good. That's just not a good system. I think, like I said, I think it's just that ultimately in the marketplace of ideas, it's not about less ideas, it's about more ideas, and hopefully more correct ideas are populating that space. So hopefully I answered your question. It's just such a large and broad question. I'll do my best.
And on the portfolio side of things for you, I'd love to dig a little deeper there as well. You oversee 28 portfolio companies that have raised over 40 million at the moment, and that represents a total enterprise value of over 200 million. In your opinion, what is the single most important factor that you see across these health tech startups that sets them up for success?
That's a good question. And I'll preface this with probably a little bit of my own bias and how I think. So just a background on me. Not that this matters at all, but anyways, I'll try to help set it up and explain where I'm coming from. Grew up in Kentucky, very much from a blue collar work ethic family, spent some time building my own company and then doing that thing. And what I've always come back to is people. And it's not necessarily the business model. It's not necessarily all that kind of stuff. I think the thing that makes businesses successful is the people. And I think, what has made all of these startups or the folks that are even the high risers within our portfolio successful is the founders and the founders' coachability more specifically. At Nex Cubed, one of the biggest things that we say, like I said earlier, is when you join Nex Cubed, you're joining a family. So we want to only bring in folks that mesh well with the family and that are going to bring an added value to that family. So I think for us, coachability is a huge thing because it's not just that I don't want to say coachability and then you only take me as Nex Cubed coach's advice. That's not what I'm saying. I'm more specifically thinking that they're open to ideas. They're open to diversity of thoughts. They're open to having constructive, maybe even challenging conversations. And then potentially them standing their ground and then or potentially changing their mind. But I think if they're coachable, there is a collective or a healthy conversation that could be had around the leadership team in the boardroom, right? And that allows the company to be agile, to be flexible, to be able to move, to be able to make strategic decisions, not get stuck in a shiny object syndrome, but actually get down to brass tacks and saying, okay, what do we need to be working on there? So I think it's really just a people thing. One of my tests I love to say is, can I get a beer with this person? Would I want to sit down, have a dinner? Would I want to enjoy an afternoon with them and talk business or talk life or be interested in what's going on? Hey, how are your kids? Things like that. So I think you just want to be able to work with good people and have good ideas and I couldn't even imagine, because essentially as an investor, you're getting married financially, right? There's a contract that's in between you two and you're tied up. I couldn't imagine going in, at least me personally, I couldn't imagine going into a deal knowing that I don't enjoy being with the person on the other side. And we're supposed to somehow make this work. I think the biggest thing for our success for our portfolio is the coachability of the founders. And then at the outside of that, it's the ability to, have you been able to do it before? That's just going to add a little bit of extra something on the side, that kind of stuff. And outside of that, but I think if I really had to boil it down, it's probably just the people and are you coachable?
I love that. In fact, shine some light on the biggest founder's dilemma that we end up seeing is pivot versus persevere. But we often see a lot of investors come in with that perspective that no matter the pivot versus perseverance, where the founder lies, as long as they're coachable, we make it through.
Think about it with just sharing deal flow, right? It's for me, I have a reputation that I need to uphold, and anybody else, if Geoffrey has a deal that he wants to send over, I'm going to trust that the person on the other side will represent me well as well. And the only way that I can ensure that is that if the person's coachable, they're willing to hear advice. Maybe that's contrary to what they've been told in the past, and they're not going to be upset about it. So I think, yeah, it just really comes back down to that.
Nick, we've been seeing, and obviously a lot more on the West Coast,
Sure,
as we normally often see in the United States, but more and more healthcare systems really start to invest more in digital health in ways that we haven't necessarily seen before. And we all know part of it is they have to do what they can to remain relevant in a very competitive, challenging time, particularly in the digital health space. But curious on your thoughts here, because historically, we have not looked to our larger healthcare systems to necessarily be the most innovative when it comes to these new elements of health tech.
Yeah.
There are certainly some that have, but historically, not as much. Your thoughts on where you see that heading?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, again, back to my Midwest roots, I'm able to sit and have a very objective opinion on both. And I think I've had some conversations from folks in the South and Southeast and hospital systems there. And I would actually think that you'd be surprised at how innovative they are due to the fact that they're in rural healthcare deserts, right? So they need digital health more than anything else. So I think, yes, the trendsetters are, I would agree with you, they're on the coast, right? You got New York as well, and you got a Boston over there, some with more pharma focus. But in terms of healthcare, it's really centralized on the coast. I think the big thing is that folks like Kaiser Permanente, they're really leading the way with integrated delivery networks. And you're also seeing the move over to accountable care organizations versus fee for service. I think accountable care organizations as just a general thing are really going to be great for our healthcare system. It gets us a little bit closer. I don't know the politics of anybody. I don't want to get into politics, but it's single payer versus all what we got over here, the spaghetti mess of our US healthcare system. But I think it'll get us a little bit closer to actually having improving outcomes at the end of the day. Anyways, that's my rant about ACOs. But I think what we're seeing and how folks that I think on the West Coast or on the coast are dealing with digital health is more of there's so many people, right? And it's how do we keep folks out of the hospital, because we're going to get overcrowded. Our ICUs are going to be just loaded up. That sets the tone to say, okay, that's digital health adoption over here. But I think in the middle of the country, it's we can't access our people, but there's still a lot of them. So they're using the same technology, but just in a different kind of way. It's to be able to still access people. And it's because instead of to keep them out because they're going to come in, we need to get to them because they can't come in, if that makes a lot of sense. So I think it's the same thing, but they're just being adopted in different ways. Places that had a privilege of talking to, like Unity Point Health out of the Midwest, is really doing some interesting things. Their corporate venture capital arm is very active. And also to some folks at LifePoint out of Nashville, I believe, they're also doing some interesting stuff there as well. Again, kind of these health deserts. So I think it's really, they're using a lot of the same technologies, but it's just approaching it from a different way. I think the easiest way that folks are doing it was different remote patient monitoring tools. The reimbursement codes are already there. It made sense. COVID could adopt it, all that stuff. You saw folks like Dexcom stock pop huge for continuous glucose monitors over COVID. It's that same kind of thing, right? That's where I see it. But you're absolutely right. The West Coast leads the way, or it has been in the past, and it's starting to trickle. But I think it's the same tech, just angled a different way.
Yeah, and your point's a good one, because the other element that I often tell startups is if you're gonna get into a marriage with a healthcare system, consider how you can still remain independent, some type of a joint venture or through a partnership. Because obviously it becomes very different if it's layered and you have to go through multiple layers of an organization versus if you're dealing with the investment arm who's going to just invest in you. I know you and I have talked before about the beauty of a public-private partnership. And then within the ecosystem of healthcare, I'm a firm believer that partnerships are truly where we truly transform the care model. But startups also need to have that autonomy to be able to actually be innovative and not necessarily get hung up, because the other element that I'm always sensitive to within healthcare is the regulatory side and the compliance side. And depending on risk management, you may not be able to move it in a year sometimes. And so we have to always be sensitive to that as well.
No, I would totally agree with you. And I think one of the points that you made was about working with internal to the business or versus the corporate venture capital arm. And I think the strategic alignment oftentimes on the investing side is that folks will suggest or recommend that specifically healthcare organizations or providers, hospital systems, whatever, any large health strategic healthcare, folks get scared away if they potentially come in to lead the round, or there's too much strategic alignment again, because I think what happens is that that company gets swallowed into that. And then also too, maybe just your only customer then becomes that organization, because other folks are like not going to want to invest in you because it's just, there's too much competition that happens. So I think it's a little bit different in how you do that. Typically how we would say that if someone wants to, like a large healthcare venture capital arm or something wants to come in and lead, we suggest maybe doing a co-lead with somebody else. I think Sway's done that in the past where they co-led with the strategic, but it takes that pressure off. Because again, sometimes if it's a truly strategic and it's like a strategic investment for them, sometimes it's just more like dumping the cash and the valuation doesn't necessarily matter. And that can screw things up as well. So I think it's back to a question to the founder. It's again, am I going into this? What's the path here that I want to take? Is this, I'm falling in love, like I'm going to go in, this could be an acquirer, I'm going to make, this is just how my vision, this is my exit strategy because it's there. Or do I want to stay a little bit more nimble, have them go through just work with them as a customer and that kind of thing? I think it's more of a fundamental question to the startups, but I just wanted to circle back to that one comment that you made.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And Nick, I'd love to extend the viewpoint on the future of health tech, right? Especially from a founder's perspective. How do you see the founders embracing for what's in store for them, especially aspiring entrepreneurs looking in building solutions for health tech?
Yeah. I've got the doom and the gloom side of it, and then I've got the good side of it, I think, as well. I think
with both.
Okay, I'll start with the bad and then we'll go with the good. I think I'm very interested to see how the public markets, we're going through a big sell-off, right? It's a huge sell-off. It's pushing down everybody's market cap. The private markets look to the public markets for comps. And I think what we're going to see is that those valuations are coming down. So I think that means that investors, so this is just a kind of a word of the wise, and we'll tell our startups the same thing. As this stuff starts to happen, investors will start to tighten down and they'll start to reserve more capital for the existing investments that they've had. So the amount of deals, I'm interested to see, this would be the doom and the gloom outlook. I'd be interested to see if we do go towards more of a recession or we're still declining or wallets are tightening, that I would see valuations potentially come down, less deals, or the opposite would be less deals, more concentrated, higher valuations. Who knows? But essentially there's going to be a consolidation effort there. And I think it's really just going to be around the fact that investors are going to have cash on hand for their existing investments, because that's going to be their first thing that they're worried about. So if you need money or you think you're going to need money, I'd say start the conversation now. Don't wait until you actually need it. So that's just my word of the wise for the founders. I know cash is always on hand, and I think that's half the reason why I lost my hair when I had my own company. So, but the other thing on the positive side, I would say, is that our time's now. We've been, like I said at the beginning of this, we've been screaming this from the rooftops ever since we figured out what digital health was, and it's here and it's now. And I think there's an opportunity for folks that they're willing to listen. And so I would recommend everybody getting out there and just talking to their potential customers as much as possible. I always recommend, if you're an early stage startup and you don't have any customers, you're thinking about doing some pilots, put together a customer advisory board. Just to have folks that get them involved, get them invested, get the director of your potential director level at your potential customer and get them all involved, make them a customer advisory board, let them put it on LinkedIn, and then whatever, have them help out. I think that is for the future, long story short, digital health is here. It's here to stay. Folks see its impact. And I think the thing is that we're really going to see more care in the home. I really think that's a big thing. I think that's going to be a very positive outcome out of this. Nobody enjoys necessarily going to the doctor. I think being able to do care at the home on your own, again, create that connectivity point back to the health system that we've all been talking about. And then we'll start to be able to work on the trust that I was talking about before, because I think it's really is going just basic stuff like being able to go get a yearly physical and trusting what your doctor has to say. And coming from the Midwest and growing up in that, I know people, it's like, spit some tobacco juice on it, rub some dirt on it, and you're done. You know what I mean? If it ain't that kind of thing, I go all the way back to that. So it would be nice to see that folks they might feel more empowered if they're like, oh, I can do my own blood pressure, I can do all this stuff, and it's going back to the doctor and it's not feeling like a burden to take it out of your day because even stuff basic down to I'm going to go to the doctor, but my doctor's always 15-30 minutes behind. That's enough for somebody not to go to the doctor. So I think hospital or care in the home, that seems so obvious, but it's here to stay. Talk to the folks, talk to the CFOs in the hospital systems. They're looking at investing. Think about places and markets that are not necessarily the West Coast of the world. Think about the middle Americas where folks are really having a hard time, like Mississippi, Georgia, all those places. It's amazing. There's so many diabetes care companies where they only talk to folks that are on the West Coast and they're all pre-diabetic, and they're about the best, healthiest pre-diabetics you can talk to, but the folks really in the middle America have some problems. So go talk to them there as well. So don't just be geographically locked in. I think also too, because COVID and everybody became digital, like I've had more meetings now than I had even when I could have had them in person, just because it's like a Zoom. It's like, hey, let's jump on. So it's that kind of stuff as well. So digital health is here. It's here to stay. That's my bet. Take it to the bank.
I love that. I'm sure a lot of our viewers would also appreciate that insight. And I think that brings us to the close of this episode. Thank you so much, Nick, for the amazing work that you're doing with Nex Cubed and also the brilliant insights that you brought to today's episode.
Yeah, no problem. You're brilliant is, I think, very generous. Thank you so much. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. It's just from my perspective, things I've learned over the years. I always like to tell folks, kind of my last parting thing is that remember your why in the face of the no. It's going to help you get up the next day. And no matter what anybody says, I believe there's enough room in this world for everyone to succeed, and keep it up. Don't give, like I said, there's enough room for everyone. Let's do it.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Yeah,
Talk to
appreciate
you guys
it.
later. Bye.
Bye-bye.